The planets have aligned, and once again, with ruthless monotony, the prophecy has come true. That's right, folks. It's time for another episode of the Roundtable Rethink podcast with me, your host, Uncle Paddy, joined every week by twin brother and spare parts bin, Andy, the asshole. Woo! And of course, we'd normally be joined by Stevie Tel Avivi. But due to work commitments, he's enjoying Paddy's Day in the fair city of Dublin and won't be with us this week. But normal service will be resumed again next week. This week, we'll be talking Manus AI, practical AI in action, namely how to make money using AI on Facebook Marketplace. And finally, we're going to be discussing entrepreneurship as part of a new 10-part series that we've developed, designed to unpack the entire entrepreneurial journey from mindset, characteristics, and idea generation all the way through to growth strategies and scaling.
Let's do it!
God damn! Alrighty then. So, no Stevie Tel Avivi this week.
It feels oddly quiet in here with it.
Weird, isn't it?
And because our voices are so similar, I feel like there's going to be one of two things is going to have to happen here. I'm going to have to say Andy before I speak, or I really should have invested in one of the kind of ransom vocoder kind of voice boxes going, give me $20 million or the girl dies tomorrow.
Hello, Sydney. So let's get started and get into the docket. So tell us about Manus AI. So Manus AI is a name. So when you're in that world and you follow the 40 or 50 guys in that world that have all the information about this, new things start to percolate and you see it happen over the course of a couple of weeks. And so you go from hearing a name you've never heard before and you go, what's that? Then you start to hear it everywhere you go. And then before you know it, every single influencer in the AI space is leading with that name. Yeah. So Manus seems to have been on that arc for the last couple of weeks. So educate everybody. What is Manus? What's making it such the in vogue product that all influencers are talking about right now?
So Manus is another one of these agentic AI products. Now, when you're explaining relatively complex systems like this, I am conscious that you've got to make it listenable and people need to be able to follow along. So we've covered this on a couple of episodes previously, but what is agentic AI? It's AI that doesn't just retrieve information for you, but can actually go off and complete tasks on your behalf. So Manus is the latest and greatest manifestation of that. So what's different about Manus? So let's imagine Manus. So the human version of Manus would be, imagine you got a super hyper smart kid with 29 PhDs that was prepared to come and intern in your office for free as basically an unpaid assistant and do any amounts of tasks that you want. What kind of things would you ask them to do, right? Do this analysis on that company and prepare me this document and then send it over here and create a course on this and go and create images and copy and stuff, load them all into these campaigns and run social media campaigns on my behalf. Anything that you would ask that super smart intern to do, Manus can do in your behalf. So what's really different about Manus is there's a couple of things. So how do you describe it to somebody? Well, Manus sits on top of Claude 3.5, right? It's on it. So Claude is essentially Manus's brain, right? So it understands, it's the cognition layer that understands and interprets your request from the prompt, right? I want Manus to go and do this and provide this and get me this and send it all back in this kind of format. Then Claude also creates the plan for Manus, the step-by-step plan, the series of actions that need to be taken to deliver that end result for you. And then it hands it across to Manus's suite of 29 independent tools that all sync and interact and hand each other off different tasks to go and basically complete that action for you and deliver you the result. So if you think about Claude as the brain and you think about Manus as the eyeballs and the fingers, so to do any task on the internet, you need a brain to conceive of it and interpret it. You need a pair of eyeballs and a set of fingers to run off and actually do the task. And that's what Manus can do. And the demos that are going up for Manus right now are unbelievable. I mean, have you seen some of these things?
Yeah, I've seen them.
There was a guy that had 50 instances of Manus running on a big, massive widescreen like you've got there. And it was basically creating 50 different social media campaigns and different accounts and creating images and generating copy and loading them into aggregators and firing off campaigns. I mean, it was unbelievable. And the kind of precursor to the Manus product was really ChatGPT Operator. So they've just taken that text to execution format. Because remember, as we spoke on previous episodes, this agentic AI is manifested in two different ways. There's voice to execution. So there's voice to outcome, which you spoke about on Alexa Plus. Put in your voice command and get the outcome that you're looking for with a whole bunch of tools in between running off and doing all the actions for you.
As in Alexa.
Alexa Plus.
Sync the song I'm listening to, bring up the movie and fast forward to that point in the movie. Boom.
Order my weekly groceries on
voice to
Tesco.
action.
Yeah. Order my weekly groceries on Tesco.com. So text to action is you put in the prompt, you put in what you're looking to create, and Manus will run off and do all the different actions that create that outcome from the end. So some of those tools that it has at its disposal, it's got a coding tool that can literally create you a website from scratch based on the prompt. It's got browsing. It's got its own web browser. It's got its own form filling tools. It's got its own content creation tools. So there's 29 individual tools that are all talking to each other and passing off work to each other in order to create the perfect outcome based on exactly what you're looking for. And one of the things that really separates it from the beta kind of Gen 1 versions of these like ChatGPT Operator, it's the slickness, it's the speed of execution, it's how well integrated the tool set is and how slickly they pass off the tasks to each other and generate the outcome for you at the end. It's faster, slicker, and just a fantastically better product all the way around.
I thought one of the big differentiators was the fact that it's got access. Every instance of Manus you spit out for a request can access a full computer.
Yeah.
So it's got access to a PC, a browser, all the programs that might be on a PC. And it's almost like you pass the request to Manus, Claude comes up with a plan, passes the plan to an orchestrator, and then the orchestrator divvies up the work between the 29 sub-models, each of which are good at a certain task.
Yeah.
And they seem to have executed on that in a way that nobody else has.
Yeah, and it's clear that this is how this agentic AI is going to present. You're going to have two options moving forward. You will have voice to execution or you'll have text to execution. And it'll be these kind of Manus-type products that deal with text to execution. And it'll be the kind of Alexa Plus type products that deal with voice to execution.
And am I right in saying that Manus is open source? It's like free and open source?
Manus is free and open source. There is now a multi-million person waiting list to get access to it.
Which I am on.
I am also on as well. But I actually have found a couple of hacks tonight, which apparently get you massively further down the queue, which I've initiated. So we'll see how that kind of plays out in the next few weeks. But I think what we're really kind of building towards here is there is now an agentic tool set becoming available for businesses that are just going to make them super productive.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I wanted to, just to really show that type of AI in action, as you know, 10 days ago, I set out a wee project for myself to basically use ChatGPT Operator, which if you just think of as a shit version of Manus, it's a slower, clunkier, more kind of grinding, almost looks like it's going to crash out at all times, but very actually seldom does. So I said, what can I do as a proof point for the show to actually show AI in action that can generate real hard cash, and I can come back and use it as a case study. So what I basically did is I used my copy of ChatGPT Operator to set up almost like a wee technical side hustle. So what I had it do is run research for me to find free stuff on Facebook Marketplace in my area. Okay. Now, it was a very long-winded prompt. It was like a 12-paragraph prompt. But the kind of short version of it is I was looking for free things in my area and I was looking for specific categorizations like appliances, bikes, sporting goods, electronic devices and stuff like that, right? So I logged it into my Facebook Marketplace account, and then I logged it into my Google Sheets account, and just I'll let it run as a background task. And I checked back 20 minutes later, and there was like 19 items that it had populated in a spreadsheet with the selling information, the product information, the product descriptions. So then when I went through that, I got it to write the outreach letters to the sellers to basically arrange the uplift of the product, to confirm that the product was still free and to arrange uplift for it. And then while it was doing that, I actually got it to run off and pick the 2 items that I ended up settling on and do price discovery on other platforms like eBay, like Etsy, and in Marketplace in other areas. And it actually come back with a bunch of sell prices for the 2 products that I ended up picking up and reselling.
Okay, so just to recap here, you ask Operator to go and find a bunch of free listings on Marketplace.
Yep.
You then bring the information back into a spreadsheet, have another follow-up query that asks it to go through the spreadsheet, take each product. Let's use an example, right? Take the washing machine.
Well, take the 2 products. It was an iPhone. There was an iPhone 11 that I ended up buying for 35 quid.
Yeah.
And there was a kind of boxing punch trainer.
I thought it was free.
No. So I got it to come up with a bunch of free items. I then got it to come up with a list of items under £50 in the electronic devices category. Okay. So I ended up selecting one. I ended up selecting one for each. So I picked a free punch trainer, which is like a freestanding punch bag thing with mitts and with boxing mitts and focus mitts and gloves.
Okay.
So we got that for free, and I ended up getting 10% discount on the iPhone 11, which was 35 quid. So I've then got my 2 items that I arranged to go and pick up. I never picked them up. Somebody else picked them up on my behalf. And then it went and did the price research.
So it took the iPhone and said, right, what's the spread on this on eBay?
And it came back with suggested sell prices.
To 200 quid.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then it wrote the listings for them to resell them on Marketplace at a price.
On eBay at a price?
No, on Marketplace. I relisted them. I sold them on Marketplace for a price. And we got the 2 items sold within a week, and I made a £78 profit.
Yeah.
So not something I want to spend a great deal of time doing.
Yeah, but just done it as a proof point.
But as a technical exercise, my involvement in that entire process was probably 10, 15 minutes.
Yeah.
And ChatGPT Operator did all the legwork.
So AI identified the products, AI did the research, AI did the outreach, and fundamentally AI wrote the listings and sold
to sell the product.
products.
Yeah.
Right, okay.
So all I had to do is get somebody to go and pick the products up and get somebody to meet somebody at the garage down the stairs while I was away on holiday to take the money and hand the product over to the person that bought them. So if you repeated, and all of those parts of the process can be scaled up, by the way. So you can scale up the sourcing of products and the identification of products. You can scale up the price discovery. You can scale up the listing process. You can scale up the writing, the offers to the sellers. So you can operationalize and scale all of those parts, all of those components of the process. And even though it took me a week to make 78 quid, the truth is you could probably make 100 quid a day, if you really actually dedicated yourself to it. So it's almost like a free money side hustle hack. But for me, I wasn't interested in the money side of it. I was really just using it as a technical exercise to prove that it can be done and to actually show you how useful these things are. Is this kind of unpaid intern that can go and do a lot of the legwork on your behalf. And remember, these are all running as background tasks. I didn't have to have my screen open, staring at it, grinding and clunking through the screens. While that was doing that, I was away and doing other work, more productive work. So Manus and ChatGPT Operator, as they're completing this work for you, you don't need to be overly vigilant for them. They're running essentially as background tasks.
So that's a no-brainer for anybody sitting in the house trying to find a job and in the meantime struggling for money. They could be deploying a bit of energy and effort into...
I'm trying to get my boy involved in it full time. I'm like, there's 1,500 quid a month to be picked up for a wee part-time gig at night. I'll scale up all the sourcing and, writing listings and stuff. And you just drive about Kilmarnock and Glasgow picking up free stuff and relisting it back on Marketplace or eBay. I could have relisted it on eBay. The platform's not important. I just chose Marketplace. It could have been anywhere.
Yeah.
The bottom line is, if you can conceive of the idea and write out a clear set of instructions by way of a prompt, it will just go and make everything happen in the background to get you the result that you're looking for.
And if you zoom out even further, it's it's a buy-sell arbitrage that can be applied to anything. Right?
Anything.
You go and buy cars on AutoTrader.
Yeah.
Exactly the same way. So you're talking about 50, 60, 70 quid margins, but depending on the type of product, you know, if you were in the jet ski industry and you knew everything there was to know about jet skis, you could have a buy and sell arbitrage on jet skis powered by AI.
Powered by AI.
And so I think that's a great example. And I hope everybody that's listening appreciates that this is all, we don't just sit here and talk about theoretical things that might be coming 5-10 years down the line. We're talking about stuff that can literally be actioned today. Literally today. And none of us started this journey AI experts. We've just invested a ton of time in the last 12 months really understanding the tool set. Outside of me, nobody in the setup's a programmer. And you don't need to be, right? All this stuff is easily accessible and available to normal people.
And you know, another point I want to make, and this is a controversial point, but it's, you know, we tried to do a kind of U-turn on this a few weeks ago, but I'm coming back to my original position. I think this is horribly destructive for jobs, because when I see things like Manus emerge and I look at all the use cases inside a business, unfortunately, for most of the use cases, it does do away with the marketing assistant, the research assistant, the kid you would normally get in for university and give them a bit of work experience. And I was listening to the CEO of Entrepr, who actually are the company that have built the model Claude 3.5, 3.7 Sonnet. And he was saying the exact same thing. He's like, it's not polite to say, because everybody's like, every revolution has led to more jobs. It's like, when you've got something that can do most things better than most people, it's not clear, just from a first principles point of view, how that leads to more jobs. Yeah. And by the way, do you know what it's going to be better at than just about anybody doing the job by the end of the year? Coding.
Yeah, for sure.
Coding is a solved problem.
100%.
They're just dialing in the last 15% just now. But then, of course, there'll be a requirement for people to basically tell it exactly what to code and how to interact with other tool sets, and you know, and what the code needs to generate and how it needs to, you know, fit in with that thing over there and stuff. So,
and there's context, right? Building something that 4 people can use as a demo is completely different to how you would build something if 4,000 people were going to use that at the same time. And so,
but the level of fit and finish on the code now is completely different
100%.
to where it was, you know, 12 months ago.
There's no doubt about that.
And he said before the end of the year, it's not clear that a competitive coder is going to be any better than it at all.
I watched an interview this morning with Elon Musk and Ted Cruz, Senator Ted Cruz. I think it was from today. I think it was from earlier today or last night. And he was asking him the same. So as the senator or the governor for Texas or whatever he is, whatever Ted Cruz is, he was very interested in, well, how does this impact jobs?
Yeah.
And Elon had the viewpoint that it would create abundance for everybody, but I never
but
really...
that doesn't mean
I
maximizing
never really
jobs.
heard him articulate how it would, and that there wouldn't be any transition in between. I genuinely believe we're moving from a period in time, the digital revolution, to the AI revolution.
Yeah.
And I think when we're fully to the other side of that, society might never look the same again. And I'm sure there is great prosperity, but the transition is going to be ugly as shit.
And we've all got kids that are
and we'll
that
have
age.
to live through the transition, but we've all done enough where it can't really screw us up at this point in our careers. Whereas the kids, my kids, your kids are young enough where they are going to have to
really
contend with
worried
this.
about this. I spend a lot of brain cycles worrying about this. Like, my daughter's a lawyer. She's a first year law student. In 4 years' time, 5 years' time, when she graduates, what does law look like? What is the requirement for human law? What is the requirement for a human to sit through paper documents and leaf through them one at a time, taking 10 minutes to read each page and make notes and stuff? Like, is that actually, can you really conceive of a future where that's actually a requirement? I don't know.
No, I don't know either. I do have a sense that the transition is going to be ugly, and it always has been if you go back through the arc of time. I don't want to rehash an old episode that we did, but every new epoch or every new generation or every new revolution brought something that we never had before. But if you were the poor fuckers who had to live through it, it was kind of nightmarish.
Yeah.
and our kids need to navigate and negotiate this whole thing. It's fascinating. I'm speaking to a bunch of 6-year leavers next Friday. And I'm struggling to figure out what to tell them other than you're all screwed unless you just
will you tell
empty
them
the bank and figure out everything there is to know about AI in the next 3 months.
You tell them the only thing you can tell them, which is it's a non-negotiable now. It's no optional. You need to get familiar with this tool set because short term, I mean, we are having our best ever year in business. We're blowing every financial number for the last 17 years out of the water. And there's no coincidence that 6 months ago we embarked on this AI journey, and it's revolutionized every part of our business and just made us fantastically better company and more profitable and more revenue. Now, eventually, people will catch up, but it's your responsibility to get stuck into this as early as you can and understand it. And if you've got half a brain at all, you'll start saying, right, well, I tried this, but it's not working over here. But I've through trying that, I've realized that I can actually deploy that into this activity here. And it's that kind of skill. It's a learn by doing type skill.
Yeah.
I've found anyway.
For sure.
Anecdotally.
It's not something you can learn in the classroom environment. You have to be engaged with the tools. You've got to be typing in the prompts. Because all that stuff is activating your brain and it's helping you go left and right and expanding your scope of thinking. So it's very much a learn by doing skill set.
But just run through this mental exercise with me for a second, right? And again, I'm trying not to be too negative or fatalistic, but I do need somebody to give me the other side of this, because I just keep thinking, unless you're a super high level strategist or hyper competent in your position, if you're just like most of us, a regular person working in a regular job, apart from the really physical jobs, like my son's a joiner in the trades and the building trades and all that stuff, if you're doing any kind of knowledge-based work or administrative work or customer service work or marketing or sales work, what is the argument for that you're going to be valuable in 5 years' time in a world of exponentially improving AI?
Yeah.
Tell me, I don't know, is there one?
I think people are going to be valuable, but I think they're going to have to really contend and learn the tool sets in order to be valuable. I don't think, put it this way, I don't think you can live in isolation, not engaging in the tool sets and continue to have the same value that you used to have. You'll absolutely be forced. I said this in a previous episode. Like, there's nothing optional here. Like, don't think, well, do you know what? Screw AI. I've always done it like this. I'll continue to do it like that. Like, you don't have that option. You're going to get on board, or you're going to be so crushed by all the people that get on board, you will have no option but to get on board in the future. We're only arguing about the timeline here.
So, by the way, just to wrap up this conversation, so I was reading today that ChatGPT 5 is now completed and being tested at the moment, and that is going to be their version of agentic AI as well, where you've got this unbelievable underlying cognition layer in terms of the frontier model, but there's going to be a massive suite of agentic tools sitting on top of it in the form of GPT-5. So just as we were saying, it's going to be a really quiet summer for announcements, might not be as quiet as we originally thought it was.
So just to wrap this segment up then, so when you and I were talking earlier, you were telling me about the interview that you watched about the guy from Entrepr.
Uh-huh.
What was it you were telling me about how many people truly understand it? And
he reckons there's 5 to 6 million people on planet Earth,
like us,
that have got an advanced understanding of AI and the use cases. And he said the thing that keeps him up at night is this is going to manifest so quickly, and it's going to leave 99% of all businesses behind.
Yeah.
And all people behind. And he reckons that a high concentration of those 5 million people are in the San Fernando Valley. Yeah. You know,
but what an opportunity that is.
0.3% of the world, basically. 0.3% of the world.
I keep telling people, if you spend a week on this, you'll already know more than 99.9% of people walking the earth. It turns out you'll already know more than 99.999% of people walking the earth. And if I was a young person, that would excite me, because I would be like, wow, I'd feel like I was like man discovering fire for the first time. Yeah. And if I can show up in an interview and I can bust out some AI chat and bust out some tools and talk about solutions using AI, I immediately stick out from everybody else in the process. So don't be too disheartened, young people. This is an opportunity as well.
Particularly in the short term.
Yeah.
I mean, if you can just do, as you said, 40 hours to get a solid foundation of the basics and the use cases under your belt, your value to potential employers is so much higher. So anyway, Manus is just the latest manifestation of agentic AI. But getting back to my prediction at the start of the year, I mean, this is 100% nailed on that this is the year where agentic AI really comes into its own and starts doing so many things for so many people.
You heard it here first on the Round Table Rethink podcast.
Yeah, baby.
Okay, moving on to entrepreneurship. So I felt like we stumbled accidentally into a conversation about entrepreneurship last week.
And by the way, can I just take responsibility for bringing straight into, like, you know, mentors and stuff?
Yeah,
although these were legitimate questions we were getting asked, I don't think we actually took the time to just step back and figure out what is the right structure to unpack this for people.
Yeah.
And so I'm glad that we got a chance to kind of readdress that quite quickly this week.
I think you're right. I think we effed it up and we managed to catch ourselves before we went too deep there. And so we've taken the time this week to come up with a structure where we can unpack the entire entrepreneurial journey from start to finish. Everything from how do you even come up with an idea? How do you even come up with a name? How do you even validate your idea, all the way through to how do you scale and grow and hire a team and sell a business, and all points in between. So for everybody listening, it's going to take us 10 full weeks, 10 episodes to get through this entire content. And then I think at the end of the 10 weeks, we'll probably cut that up into a, what do they call it? A mega mix or something?
Yeah. Mega mix.
now 75. The entrepreneurship mega mix. So we'll cut it up into some mega mix at the end, but where are we going to get started? So let me talk you through the subject matter. So week one, which we'll talk about in just a minute, is the entrepreneurial mindset, characteristics of entrepreneurs, and idea generation. That's what we're going to talk about on this episode. The following week, it's going to be understanding your market. The week after that is going to be business strategy and planning. The week after that is going to be finance and accounting for entrepreneurs. I know. Then we're going to talk about product development and innovation, my favorite subject. Then we're going to talk about Andy's favorite subject, which is marketing and branding.
Yeah, baby.
And of course, you can't talk about entrepreneurship without talking about sales and customer acquisition the following week. Then we're talking about operations and supply chain, building and managing a team, all the way through to growth strategies and scaling your business.
Like a motherfunker.
That's going to be the agenda for the next 10 weeks.
Can't wait to get stuck into it.
Let's get stuck into this week's topic. So think about the entrepreneurial mindset, the characteristics that entrepreneurs demonstrate. And how do you come up with that first idea? How do you generate the idea? And then most importantly, once you've got an idea, how do you validate it and make sure your idea doesn't suck? So I'm not going to spend too much time on the mindset thing because we did actually cover a lot of that last week.
Can I just say something quickly on mindset? So I think the kind of 60-second version for me is I still believe that true entrepreneurs are born, not made, but I do think you can learn to be more entrepreneurial. What do I really mean by that? I just mean that if I go and play basketball and practice 8 hours a day for the next 12 months, I will be a fantastically better basketball player than I am just now.
Yeah.
But I am never going to be able to hold a candle to anybody playing in the NBA.
Yeah.
Because they are just thoroughbred, born to do it athletes that were just naturally gifted in that regard. And I do believe that the best entrepreneurs are the same.
Yeah.
But I do believe that there's mindsets and behaviors that you can adopt and that you can commit to that will make you fantastically more entrepreneurial and give you a chance at a really successful outcome.
And one of the things that we will talk about is actually the negative side of the mindset thing, not just all the mindset stuff and the characteristics you need, but what's the self-disqualifying characteristics? Because as we've always maintained, guys, entrepreneurship is not for most people. And that's not a bad thing. You can do
It's a very uncomfortable way to live your life.
You can do just fine working a job and doing well in your career and succeeding and
climbing the ladder
and going up through the ranks. There's nothing wrong with that at all. So we're not sitting here saying you got to be an entrepreneur or you're a loser. We're just saying there's some characteristics as it relates to entrepreneurship which are self-disqualifying, and I'll cover a couple of them as we go along. So what I wanted to talk about is the non-obvious stuff, right? So I think in terms of mindset, the obvious stuff would be, well, you've got to be positive and you've got to be adaptable and you've got to be resilient. And they're all things that we take for granted. And of course, it helps if they things are true. But then there's stuff that we don't really talk about that are less obvious that I think is way more important than all of the things. So when I think about characteristics and mindset, one of the first things I think about is authenticity. I think finding your authentic self.
Yeah.
Finding your authentic voice. Are you a truly authentic person? Or do you live a fake life?
And by the way, that was one of the conversations that we had when we started this podcast, right? Yeah. It was self-disqualifying. If you were coming on this mic every week, optimizing every word that came out your mouth, worrying about if this person was going to hear it and augmenting this kind of online persona of yourself, that was disqualifying to be involved in this podcast. One of the reasons we've had a bit more traction than most people doing podcasts is we really are being ourselves, for good or for bad.
In the pub,
we sound like this on a Friday morning
and we
at
sound
breakfast.
like this at the dinner table.
Yeah.
So I think authenticity. I mean, I think about my career. I would say that I'm authentic to the point where it sometimes gets me in trouble.
Yeah.
And it particularly got me in trouble when I first encountered corporate. So when I sold my business back in 22 and went to work for a big corporation.
What you mean when you get reprimanded for the CEO of the company, you can't threaten to break his fucking jaw?
No, it was not that. By the way, just so everyone knows, my performance reviews were fantastic. But they went like this: Paddy, you're crushing it. Like, you're super effective. You're busting your ass.
And shouting at people.
Just stop telling people to fuck off, would you? So I think being authentically yourself is great, because you see a lot of entrepreneurs that turn into the business asshole version of themselves that is completely false. It's wholly false, as David Starkey would say. And it's the online cartoon character of themselves that they're trying to play. And I don't know, there's something about
presenter, kind of BBC News presenter. Ooh, good evening.
Yeah, the guy who sells Sell It Bang on the TV. He goes, bang, and the dirt is gone, bang. Like, he does not sound like that at the breakfast table, and he doesn't sound like that at the pub. But he's playing and to an extent, I play an exaggerated version of myself for the intro of the podcast, but that's just a bit of a laugh, right? I don't keep that going for an hour. So I think being truly authentic is something people can feel. You actually can't quantify it, and you can't point to it, but you know when it's happening.
Yeah.
And I would say, of all the characteristics and the mindset stuff, just staying true to myself. And some people loved it, and then some people, it absolutely repelled them. Yeah. And you've got to be comfortable with both of the outcomes. But if you're just a fucking weather vane that blows with the wind, and I'll do anything you want me to do, then what do you stand for? Yeah. Like, what are you all about? And the answer is, we don't know, because we can mold you into whatever we need you to be.
What is it? Here are my values. If you don't like them, I have others. Exactly. I can show you.
So I think authenticity is a really, really big one. There's obvious things like, to be an entrepreneur, you've generally got to have high levels of energy.
Yeah.
And drive.
And an obsessive personality actually really helps. It's terrible for most things, as I know better than most, but it's actually a superpower in business.
100%. But if you didn't have energy, if you were known and people regarded you and it was a bit of a running joke that you were a super low energy person, that's probably a self-disqualifying characteristic for entrepreneurship.
Absolutely, because in order to sell a product or a service or build a team, you've got to get people to believe you and buy into what you're doing, and that requires a certain level of conviction and energy to do it.
Yeah. I think you can be... So ideally, you'd be high IQ and high EQ combined. But if you had to only have one of those things, you would much rather have EQ than
for
IQ.
Sure. Because IQ is being commoditized with AI, and
And business is a people game, and it's about dealing with people. And if you
100%.
can't, if you're the smartest guy in the world, but you cannot walk into a room and introduce yourself,
Yeah.
it's why there's a whole bunch of programmers who have great business ideas in their head,
yeah,
but they can't actually run a business that does that thing, that sells that thing, that markets that thing, that scales that thing,
Yeah.
because they've got the IQ to make it. They don't have the EQ to build a team and scale a business.
and it's very important, particularly if you're to have that if you're starting a business with no money. I mean, we are both, I think, very proud of our accomplishments. We both built fantastic businesses with no money and no contacts, and I mean that legitimately, literally less than no money.
So I'm going to do one more, and then I'm going to tie it back to our personal stories.
Okay.
And we'll talk about what was the mindset you were in when you started Coast, and what was the mindset I was in when I built Evolution X. But let me just do one more before that. So the last mindset characteristic thing for me would be curiosity.
Yeah.
People, great entrepreneurs, are endlessly curious.
Oh, yes.
Like, my need to understand stuff is absolutely absurd.
Autistic. I'm the same.
Totally autistic. If I've got an electrician in my house, I'm following him about the fucking place, driving him nuts. Paul, if you're listening, I'm sorry.
Sorry, mate.
If I ever did this to you. But I'm following them about, not because I want to make sure they're working. I'm dying to know, why does that cable need to run, and why do we need that thing? It's the why. It's the why of everything. I'm a man quite haunted.
And it's why we get pissed off when we go into a car dealership or something, or a PC world, and we know 74 times more
God.
about the product than the person trying to sell us it.
There's nothing more infuriating than that. So the why and the curiosity thing is really important to me, and it really, really helps very early in your entrepreneurial journey if you can find a framework for thinking.
Yeah.
Can you find a mental framework to work through problems and to think through things? And so for me, this was the biggest game changer I've ever done. Before Elon articulated exactly what it was to reason up from physics first principles.
First principles, yeah.
I had learned a version of that from the guys at 37 Signals, the guys that make the CRM product.
David Hanneman Hansen, try saying that.
And Jason Fried.
3 times fast after 4
Two of the
Jack
smartest
Daniels.
guys on the planet, 2 of the greatest product minds on the planet, 2 of the most unbelievable business builders and contrarians as well.
Yeah.
They've almost got an alternative take to everything.
Most things,
They almost like rail against conventional wisdom. And so Elon has a very similar framework for thinking, and it's one that I use to solve problems. And so it kind of goes a bit like this. So the first step of the framework is your requirements are dumb, make your requirements less dumb. Okay?
Yeah.
So, and by the way, it's particularly dangerous if a smart person gave you their requirements, is you might not actually question them enough because they're super smart.
Yeah.
So absolutely question everything, pare everything back, strip everything down, make your requirements less dumb. Everybody's requirements can be honed into something more simple, more beautiful, more elegant. The next step is to delete the part or the process long before you ever simplifize, optimize, and automate it.
The most efficient part of any process is no fucking part at all.
Exactly.
Yeah. Delete.
So scrutinize every part and process and look for opportunities to delete. He would tell you that unless you're actually adding back in 10% of the stuff that you deleted, you're actually not deleting enough
You haven't
stuff.
cut deep enough, yeah.
Yeah. So look for opportunities constantly to delete the part or the process step. Then only when you've done step 1 and step 2 can you simplify and optimize. So the most common things that smart engineers do is they actually end up fucking simplifying and optimizing something that should never have existed in the first place. That's why it's so important to do steps 1 and 2 before you get to that. And then second from last, once you've made your requirements less dumb, once you've deleted all the process steps and parts that you can, and you've simplified and optimized that thing, now increase the cycle time.
Yeah.
How do you do more of that faster? And there's always a way to do more
To do more of
faster.
that faster.
And then only when you've done step 1 through 4 do you then automate that thing.
Yeah.
And actually, I've seen people in my business do this whole thing in reverse. So they start by automating something, which then actually cost us energy, time, and money to... it actually screwed the cycle time of that process up rather than increase the cycle time. We then went back and simplified and optimized it. We then deleted parts, and then we went back and realized that the requirements originally were completely dumb. Yeah. So I've definitely made the mistake of doing this process in reverse.
I 100%
more times than I'm
done
comfortable admitting to.
Totally.
It is,
because it's the most natural thing to do.
Yeah, and so before we move on from this, I'm going to give one example, right? So reasoning up from physics first principles rather than reasoning by analogy means that if you're hearing from people, well, it's always cost that, and that's just how much it costs to build a rocket, or that's just, batteries have always been $800 a kilowatt hour, and that's as cheap as you can build a battery.
Because that's as cheap as it's ever been to build a battery.
Exactly. So if you're ever hearing that stuff, you've got to be super duper skeptical. Nobody's ever been able to integrate with Epic or Eclipse.
Yeah.
Why? Just nobody's ever been able to do it.
Therefore, it can't be done.
Question all that stuff, right? And so what he did with the Falcon 9 rocket is NASA and other people came and said, listen, nobody can build a rocket for less than $100 million. That's just how much it costs.
I think it was only like $1 billion or something.
Yeah, it was crazy. It was like, I'm making numbers up here, but just to make the point. So the numbers were crazy, and then he started going, why? And so if you reason up from first principles, you basically take the rocket and you deconstruct the atoms. So you go, well, what is a rocket? Well, a rocket's just 100 tons of aluminum.
X amount of tons of zinc and
50
copper.
tons of copper, zinc, carbon.
What are the raw material costs?
What are the raw material costs of that? Oh, $4 million. Okay, and what
if you could reorder them by waving a magic wand across them? Yeah,
exactly. So when he looked at the rocket, he actually discovered that the raw material costs for the rocket were like $8 million rather than $100 million. And so that means $92 million was in the assembly of the atoms into a rocket. And so he brought focus, time, and attention to that process.
And how do you assemble the atoms in the most efficient way possible?
What atoms do you no longer need? What can you delete? What can you simplify? And he applied the framework for thinking, the first principles framework, and has now got an unassailable lead in launch cost per ton to orbit. It's like ridiculous. He's so far ahead of the next guy, it's almost not worth competing at this point.
Despite millions of dummies on X going, Elon's rocket blew up again. Oh,
I know.
No, very good, Elon. It's like, the
world is full of idiots with terrible takes. So that would be a classic example of reasoning up from first principles. So if you want to do more reading on this yourself and how you would apply this framework for thinking to your business, and it is you don't need to be building rockets or battery storage for this to work. Yeah. It can work in any type of business, but reason up from first principles.
So important. We are literally going to move on just now to the next part of this, the final part of it. But the last wee thing that I just want to give entrepreneurs permission to do in this mindset segment is it's okay, because failure and setbacks are built into the entrepreneurial process as you go through it to varying different degrees. And I think for some people, they think that entrepreneurs just don't feel that, or for every failure, they just go, I don't care, let's just bull through it and stuff. When I think back to some of the things that never worked for us, it's absolutely fine to feel defeated for a period of time. I've had setbacks where I felt completely defeated and I just need to go into a corner and kind of curl up in a ball for an hour or two or half a day to really get over it. But just don't get terminally disheartened. So it's absolutely fine to feel defeated. Setbacks are normal. A certain level of failure is normal, particularly if you're trying to do something that's hard. But I did say that entrepreneurship is the art of taking repeated penalty kicks to the face without getting terminally disheartened. And so that's really the thing I want to double click on.
Connect that, because I want to get finished up here in 15 minutes and we've still got, like, how did you identify the idea and how did you validate the idea? So to wrap the mindset thing, think back to when you started Coast.
Yeah.
Like, what was the mindset and the characteristics that you managed to tap into in order to take the leap from a safe job into entrepreneurship?
I think you and I were both entrepreneurs from the get, when we were standing at that burger van at 13, deconstructing the guy's business model while my dad was just fulminating about the type of onions and tomato sauce they were about to put on the burger. I think it was just in us from the DNA. Yeah. I think I've always had a really good, one of my few good qualities is that I don't get terminally disheartened. For every major setback that I've had in my entrepreneurial journey, I've went away, I've licked my wounds, I've tried to learn from the mistake, I've gathered myself back up again and ran fucking face first back into the fire, towards the gunfire. And so I have had good levels of resiliency in me where I've not been terminally disheartened with setbacks. But I have felt, at the time, I felt the sting of them, and I felt, momentarily defeated, but that's just a part of it.
For me, the mindset, like entrepreneurship for me, more than anything else, it was never about money, it was about freedom. 100%. It was about the freedom of not actually having to salute somebody else in the morning. I have, since I was a small child, fucking hated being told what to do.
Yeah.
Like, it would send a blood-curdling, murderous fucking rage through me.
Yeah.
And nothing would actually be...
Which is totally unreasonable, but it's just true, nonetheless.
My teachers who taught me at that age would recognise that character trait in me. My family would recognise that character trait in me. Emma's probably listened to the podcast in an hour's time. She'll certainly recognise that. I hate being told what to do. I find it... by the way, I'm not bragging here. I know it's not a particularly good character trait, but it is mine.
Yeah.
And there was nothing actually worse than being told what to do by people you don't like and you don't respect.
Yeah.
And so I jumped, I was on the senior leadership team of a business in London at 21 years old.
I remember it.
I'd got on the corporate ladder very early, never really enjoyed the corporate experience, ended up saluting a bunch of people I didn't particularly like or respect. And that was the moment where I was like, it's not about making money for me. It's not like, well, I need to get to 100 grand a year, 200 grand a year, 500 grand a year. It was just like, how do I get up in the fucking morning and be responsible for generating my own income without having to salute people I don't like? And by the way, I'm a man still haunted today with terrible dreams that I have at least once or twice a month.
Where you end up back working for somebody.
I'm back working for somebody. I'm in a cold sweat. They're like bossing me about, billing me about. There's nothing I can do it because I'm broke and I need the money. And
even though it's a literal impossibility,
I'm going home every night, right? Like, I'm haunted by that dream to this day. So for me, entrepreneurship was about freedom.
Yeah,
the money came later, but it started by being free.
Yeah, and it's the best part about entrepreneurship.
And then when the business developed, it was actually driven by fear. The terror of when the kids came along.
We're both fear-based organisms, like 100%.
When the kids came along, the terror of not being able to provide for the kids was what and spurred the business.
And fear is a great forcing function to make you do uncomfortable things you otherwise wouldn't do.
And that's quite an unintuitive insight, I think. I think people try and go, well, it's about inspiration
motivation and inspiration.
Well, fucking terror's a
pretty
pretty
good
good
about being fear
motivator as well. And I was terrified that one day I'd come home and I'll be able to provide for the kids, and that would just...
And your benchmark changes. Like every time you kind of move up the ladder, if you make X amount and then, right, I want to make 100 grand, I want to make 200 grand, I want to make... Whatever the number is, you get to that number, there's just always that fear of going back to zero again. Do you know what I mean? It's just,
So we know the mindsets that entrepreneurs need to be in. We know the self-disqualifying mindsets. We know the characteristics. And at this point, you need an idea.
You need an idea.
So how do we get into coming up with that idea? So I'll let you take a first run at this.
Mine's was entirely accidental. So it was a natural progression from something that was already working for us. So as has been touched on once or twice during the episodes in this podcast, we have been gigging musicians for we were 17 years old, singing in bands and playing in bands. And even though there were people that were fantastically more musically talented than us, we were super successful, particularly you and I, and then Lee and I, not because we were amazingly musically talented, but because we understood how to acquire customers on the internet and look after them. And so Lee and I accidentally kind of became probably for a period of time the busiest band in the entire country, being bang average singers and musicians, poor musicians. And it was because of your ability to basically... this is what fucking dorks we are. Do you remember 23 years ago sitting in your kitchen in Bray Head with a binder?
Yeah.
A paper binder. Was it Corey Rudel or Brad Sugars or something? It was a copywriting binder.
One of the gurus.
It was one of the gurus. And we were sitting at Paddy's breakfast bar in Braehead
Writing the
23
sales
years
copy.
ago, writing the sales copy for our Vivid Entertainment website, which was
Do you know who it was? It was Jay Abrahams.
Jay Abrahams.
It was a tape series that came in a binder. It was a cassette series.
And it
was
showed
Jay
you how to
Abrahams.
write copy for landing pages back when nobody really knew what a landing page was. And we had a wee band at the time called Vivid. And I still remember, so it was headlines, subheadings, and how to really make them compelling. And I remember it to this day. It was like, discover the secrets behind 300 ecstatic brides, 50,000 exhausted guests,
A mile upon mile of
worn out dance floors, and why over 300 real couples chose us when it absolutely positively had to be a great night or something.
Yeah.
And that fucking copy and that landing page and our ability to deploy it in all the right places was probably responsible for about 150 to 200 grand's worth of gigs for us when that was a lot more money than it is today.
Yeah.
So anyway, because we were so successful doing that for ourselves, and the nature of that job is that you can only be in one place, gigging in one venue on the one night. We ended up becoming unavailable for about 90% of all inbound inquiries. And so in the first instance, we just started handing them out to friends and colleagues in the industry. And then we were like, wait a minute here. There's not actually a lot of people know how to do this bit. I wonder if they'd pay us a success fee for, doing their videos and getting them the bookings and dealing with the customers and dealing with all the admin. And so what we basically did was just scale up and operationalize all the things that were already working for our band. So I can't say there was some grand plan to start an agency. We just kind of fell into it as a natural extension through the success that we had with the band.
But I think it if you zoom out, it actually feeds quite nicely into a point here, which is
do what you're good at.
It aligned with your interests and your talents.
Yeah.
Right? And so you didn't try and go and make money in something you had absolutely no idea about. It completely and totally aligned with your interests and your talents.
Yeah.
And my story is exactly the same. I wrote my first computer program when I was 14. I've been obsessed with it ever since. I'm obsessed with software the way that people love cheese and steaks and wine.
Maybe not the way I love cheese.
And I have been since I was a wee boy. And we had elderly grandparents who lived with us at the time.
Granny Henny and Papa Andy.
Remember being a wee guy coming in off the school bus, and I'd used to come in and I'd fight my papa for the TV remote. And he'd be watching some ghastly British sport like snooker or darts or something like that. And I'd be desperate to watch John Craven's News Round.
Yeah, or CBBC.
So John Craven's News Round was a show that took the news of the day and then dumbed it down for kids.
Yeah.
And so I remember coming in this day and watching John Craven's News Round, and they were talking about this thing called the Information Superhighway. It was like an early version of the internet.
Yeah.
And it was only available in America. And the demo was that a document was sent from a computer on the east coast of the country and came out in exactly the same, in color, the whole thing, full fidelity on the west coast of the country. And this was in a world where you sent like low resolution faxes to people.
And also known as an email.
I remember my brain exploding with the possibility of that, and then thinking, Jesus Christ, I don't know what that is, but whatever that is, that's what I want to do. Now, it would take me another 12 years to work myself up into a position where I could actually go and start
do something about it.
That. And for a long time, I did it as a side hustle and learned everything there was to know about it. But my business was born out of the same thing. So how did I get started? I got started because I was a sales guy working for Uncle's Office Furniture, Office Stationery.
Shout out, Uncle Joe.
For the second week in a row.
Woo!
And so because I was technical, I was a sales guy, but I was always also technical. And Joe had an e-commerce platform at the time. He had a website that his customers could buy
stationery on.
Products on.
Yeah.
And it was provided by the main wholesaler in the space. It was a platform specifically for office products dealers called OPIPs. And I remember like going out and installing OPIPs on the network at Prestwick Airport, like getting in the fire
on
marshal
a fucking
truck
CD-ROM,
going across to the other side of the fire station, putting the CD-ROM in, like loading in OPIPs, loading in the quick list of items that these guys bought.
Yeah.
And so I would be the guy who went out and demonstrated that product, but it was so janky and it was so unreliable. And every single fucking demo, my heart would be in my mouth because I would show up and I'd be like, shit, is it going to crash? Is the computer going to reboot? Is it going to do a Windows update when I'm trying to load it in? And so I would go to prospective clients and try and show them OPIPs, and 5 times out of 10, the thing either wouldn't load, or it would be unusably slow, or it would just crash out in the middle of the demo.
Yep.
And I remember thinking, for fuck's sake, there's got to be something better than this. Yes. And then when I looked, it turns out there wasn't. And so I just had this idea where there's got to be a whole bunch of people like my Uncle Joe who need something like this up and down the whole country. But it would actually take many, and that idea stuck with me, and I had it in the back of my mind for years. It would take me many years from that point to then go and execute on the idea. But it was born out of frustration. Yeah. And it was aligned with my interests and my expertise. Talents. And so there's a theme developing here. So if you're struggling to think what business idea you need to get, if you feel that you've got the entrepreneurial thing in you, but you're struggling for the idea, just list out all your interests and all your talents and see if you can align a problem that needs solving with that. Now, I do want to stress that just identifying a problem alone is not enough. Mm-hmm. Because there could be cases made for tons of different things where you could go, yeah, I mean, because X, Y, and Z and how difficult that is, that's a problem. Sure. But is the pain associated with that problem enough where it's going to motivate somebody to act or write a check? Because I've got a very slight leak in the sink underneath the kitchen. Or in the sink in the kitchen, right? There's a very slight leak. It fills up a small Tupperware dish once a year. And so
it's causing you so little problems that you can't motivate yourself to deal with.
To try and find a fucking plumber who will take my phone call and then actually show up. Mm-hmm. So guess what? The smartest young entrepreneur in the world can go, well, obviously that's a problem and it needs a solution. You're right, but the pain level's not high enough to motivate me to act. So don't think about problems that need solutions in isolation. You've got to convince yourself, is it a problem with a high enough pain associated that would motivate somebody to get their checkbook out and write a check? Yeah. And that's kind of the acid test that the whole
and this is the whole concept of validating your idea.
Yeah. So that would be one way. Of course, it's never been easier to come up with business ideas because you can use AI to feed you a whole bunch of different business ideas, right? So if you just list out all your interests, list out all your passions, list out all your talents, and then feed it into ChatGPT and go, I'm an entrepreneur who's thinking about starting a business. Here's all my talents. Here's all my interests. Come up with 10 different business ideas that have a very high pain component associated with a problem that, you're looking to solve.
Because it's never been easier in 2025 to start a business, but it's never been harder to make money in a business. And that's very important. Saying,
ideas are like assholes.
Yeah.
Everybody's got one, and most of them are shitty. So you got the mindset, we know the characteristics, we've got some idea how we come up with a business idea. And so the final thing we'll finish on is, how do you validate that idea is any good? And how do you know what feedback is worth taking on? And how do you know what feedback to discard?
Yeah.
So what do you say to that?
So I've got a few anecdotes on that. So we were very lucky when we started our business that after kind of 18 months, 2 years of kind of struggling away, kind of getting nowhere, somewhere, kind of, we eventually get accepted into Tom Hunter's Business Accelerator, Entrepreneurial Spark. And the entire journey of Entrepreneurial Spark was about validating your business, essentially, and improving it. So they had a kind of process that they put you through, again, a lot of it based around about this concept of ideation. So just taking your business, stripping it back in a kind of first principles ways. And because entrepreneurs can be quite delusional.
Yep.
And you can convince yourself that your business is really important and really valuable when actually it's not really solving much of a problem for anybody at all, or you think it's differentiated, but it's actually completely commoditized your service. And so they were great at just really drilling down through a series of adversarial questions, and then they would go off and do their own research. Well, you told me that you were the only person that's doing this, but I've actually just found 17 people in your area that's doing exactly. They held you accountable. There was this whole concept of ideation. And then when they stripped everything back to its first principles, to the kind of things that you had there that where you did have an idea, then you did have something there that was tangible. They would help you put Humpty Dumpty back together again in a much more kind of sustainable way. And actually, we built in differentiators, either service or product, and things that gave you some kind of competitive position in the market.
I think there's a couple of things that people do. You know, they go to family members and friends, and a lot of time they're looking for an echo chamber.
Yeah.
They're looking for somebody to go, oh, that sounds great. I mean, that would be absolutely brilliant. They're not looking for... I think if you're a budding entrepreneur out there, seek out honesty.
Yeah.
Like, even if it's not what you're looking to
Seek
hear,
critical
save you a bunch of money
feedback.
and time.
Yeah.
So solicit negative feedback. Go to that super negative person in your family that's going to come up with 50,000 different reasons why you shouldn't start the business, and then go and start it anyhow, right?
And then there's an easy one as well. Speak to customers.
Go to the people who write the checks for this thing.
Speak to potential customers and solicit candid feedback from them on your idea. That is still one of the most powerful things. Fuck AI. That's still one of the most powerful things that you can do.
Everybody ready for this? When I was selling my own e-commerce product, which I had yet to build, I did an artist's impression of it drawn onto a A1 flip chart pad and toured the country showing office products dealers what it would look like when it was finished. Yeah. And so I was the only guy who ever presented a e-commerce platform product on paper back in 2006. But I wasn't really there to present a product. I was there to find out what was the pain point, what were they really struggling with, and this thing that I could at least visualize for them, did they have even a sense that this would be something that would be value to the business? Even help them come up with a price point, you know? Yeah. Don't be scared to ask questions like, hey, what would you be prepared to pay for something like this? I used to de-risk the whole thing for people. I would say, do you know what? When this thing's finished, I'm going to give it to you for 3 months. Yeah. And if you can use it and you love it, pay me for it and we'll agree a fee. And if you don't, I totally get it and we'll move on.
And it's a brilliant way to validate the idea. Our version of that, the 60-second version, we have 2 customers. We have the bands themselves and we have the people that's booking the band. So we're serving 2 masters. And so we said to the band, are you able to get your own gigs? Are you prepared to spend your own money on speculative marketing that may or may not work? Are you prepared to pay for your own video? Are you prepared to pay for your own pictures and your own audio? And answer came them none. And if there was an answer, it was no. And we're like, great, if we do all of that on your behalf and we only charge you a success fee on the other side of acquiring a successful booking for you, do you think that would be good? And they all went, fuck yeah, where do we sign? Yeah. We then went to the customers. Remember, everything's of its time. So 18 years ago, if you were looking for a band for your event or your wedding, you basically went to the same golf club, bowling club or pub that your mum and dad or you and your partner drunk in, and you selected for one of the 4 or 5 bands that played in there, normally the best one, or what was perceived the best. But what we actually found for customers is they wanted a place, a destination where they could compare and review a much wider range of high quality products and run comparisons against them and hear what other people that booked them thought, and look at videos and look at set lists and get a real-time price and availability quote. And we just took all that customer feedback and created a set of features that addressed that. Yeah. So that's how we validated our idea.
Yeah, if you just ask people a bunch of questions, they'll tell you everything you need to know to.
And don't lead the witness, solicit the candid feedback that's uncomfortable to hear.
Yeah. And so to wrap this segment up, which I think has been a great, the conversations went in an odd direction. Yeah. It's went somewhere I didn't think it would go, but I'm actually quite happy with the outcome of this and the type of things that we've discussed here. This is actually really cool and a nice trip down memory lane. So just on the idea validation thing, I had one thing that just slid through my brain there, and then the problem is it slid off the back of it into the abyss.
Over the event horizon.
I don't know. Couldn't have been that important because it's not coming back to me. Anyway, we're an hour and 3 minutes in to episode 9 of the round table. No, episode 10.
Episode 10. We're in double figures now.
Come on now.
Come on.
Episode 10 of the Round Table Rethink podcast.
So we will pick this up next week, probably in the presence of Stevie Tel Aviv, who will have wise pearls of wisdom to drop into the conversation. And I think we've covered a lot more ground than I think we had originally planned on covering tonight. So I'm pretty happy with that.
And so next week's topic on the entrepreneurship series is understanding your market. So that's what we'll be getting into. That's what I was going to say.
It's came back.
Sorry, this will be the last thing. So the big company version of this, and you should definitely not do this if you're a budding entrepreneur just getting started, is the TAM, SAM, SOM analysis, right? What's the total addressable market, the sellable addressable market, the obtainable addressable market? The truth is, you're one man band, and it don't matter.
Yeah.
So there is,
and sometimes TAM and SAM are actually a negative correlator to success.
Yeah.
There are some markets we all came for office products, right?
Yeah.
A truly ghastly place to try and make money in. But for the outside looking in,
TAM, SAM is every company on
wow,
earth.
it's a £8 billion industry. That's right.
Yeah.
And because of that, every product category is
Hyper-commoditized.
saturated with competition, and the margin's been starched out at every product category. So you can do £100 million in revenue and do fucking 50 grand a year in profit. Sometimes a too big a TAM is a negative correlation.
And the only reason I brought that up is because there is a budget of time you should allocate to this kind of mental masturbation about your idea. But eventually you've got to get to a point pretty quickly. Don't beat it to death, right? I mean, for sure, make your calls, do your research. But at some point you've got to shit or get off the potty. At some point you've got to go do. You've got to, what's the line from Top Gun Maverick? Don't think, just act. Or don't think, just do.
Yeah.
Is that not what Maverick says to Rooster? Don't think, just do. Anyway,
That's in the second one.
yeah.
Aye, yeah.
So don't
Not
think.
the one you get whacked with the canopy.
No. So don't think, just do.
Yep. So we're crossing over into understanding your market. So we'll keep our powder dry.
Because if you keep grinding on an idea and you keep finding reasons not to do it, you will eventually find one that nails you and you won't do it.
You won't do it.
All right, there you go, folks. Episode 10 in the can. We'll see you back here next week. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.